Good afternoon, everyone. It's David Schlotthauer here with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. To start off the video, here's a look at the latest GOES 19 True Color Visible Satellite Imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com. There will be a link in the description below this video. And what we have right now is an area to watch, mainly in the Eastern Pacific. This has a 40% chance of tropical development in the next 7 days. We'll look at that in just a little bit on the National Hurricane Center website. But otherwise, the main development region of the Atlantic is looking pretty quiet, although we do have a little bit of a tropical wave here now crossing over into the 40-degree west longitude line, with a lot of drier air that is coming in on the back side of that tropical wave. So therefore, this is not going to develop at all because we have this big old fat Azores high up here bringing down a lot of drier air, a lot of Saharan dust coming off of Africa, keep things pretty stable out here. But we all know that is not going to last forever, and there are early indications once we get into June, things could wake up in the tropics, especially in the portions of the main development region in the Caribbean as well as the Gulf of Mexico. Now, taking a look at the very latest Day 2 graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center, and of course, there is nothing to be concerned about over the next 48 hours, according to the National Hurricane Center. But when we go over the next 7 days here from the NHC, there's also nothing to be concerned about right now in the main development region in the Gulf of Mexico or much of the Atlantic Basin. And that's how it should be this time of the year. After all, it's only the 21st of May, and we have a long way to go before we are done with the hurricane season, which hasn't begun yet. It won't begin until next weekend. So pretty much a little over a week away before we officially begin the season. However, the season has begun in the Eastern Pacific, and right out of the gate, we already have an area of interest from the National Hurricane Center here in the Eastern Pacific. As we do update this is as of 10:29 this morning, so we don't get a new update here yet. This has a 40% chance of tropical development in the next 7 days, with a 0% chance of tropical development in the next couple of days. This is going to be that area that could get very, very close to portions of Mexico like Puerto Vallarta, and eventually getting awfully close to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico in the next 7 to 10 days. We'll be looking at that in today's video too. Now, with that being said, I wanted to show you all the very latest 850 millibar vorticity plot here from the University of Wisconsin, a really cool website to see these things. And this is current. This is actually the latest update, and this is put into the global computer models to where we could forecast these things. So what you're looking at is basically how much spin there is in the atmosphere, which is 5,000 feet above the surface. And that's our favorite layer that I like to see if there's going to be any tropical storm development or any hurricane or any tropical depression or simply a tropical wave. Right? So this is where that tropical wave is actually located here. There is a little bit of spin, not a whole lot, but there's enough to where the tropical weather outlook team has highlighted a little bit of a tropical wave there in the deep tropics, but otherwise things look pretty quiet. But this is what we look for here. All these red colors, that's spin. That's how much rotation there is in the atmosphere. Now let's put this into motion here on the GFS model. This is the global forecasting system, the American model. My favorite layer to look at is the 850 millibar layer, which is again 5,000 feet above the surface. And what you're looking at here is a 3-plot system. I've mentioned this many times in the video, and I'll be happy to mention it in this video too. So what you're looking at here is the thicknesses. That's the black lines that you see here, so we can see where our ridge of high pressure is located here at 5,000 feet. And then, of course, the color shading here on the map is vorticity, how much spin is in the atmosphere, and this is deemed cyclonic relative vorticity. Okay, so the redder colors indicate more spin and it's tighter, more concentrated, versus the dark red colors indicate very tight, very concentrated, amount of spin, and that's usually deemed where we have a tropical storm or a hurricane that happens in the deep tropics. Now, they could happen, of course, in much higher latitudes up here, but they're usually non-subtropical or non-tropical related versus down here in the deep tropics, if that makes sense. And then, of course, your wind barbs are telling us the intensity of the wind and which way it's blowing from. So you can see here, we have winds that are coming out of the easterly direction at about 10 to 15 knots at 5,000 feet. So this gives us an idea that, okay, this is where our ridge actually is, which, by the way, I'm giving you a spoil alert, but we're actually going to get into our actual forecast here. And this is what our ridge looks like right now. Okay, that's where our ridge is, really matches well with that satellite imagery. So let's put this into motion. Let's see with what we got ahead of ourselves here over the next 5 days. And there's nothing to worry about at all. Although if we go back here, there is that subtlety of a tropical wave. It's barely noticeable here. I would even deem it as a tropical wave, but it does count. It's our first tropical wave emerging off of Africa this pre-hurricane season. And then as we go forward here, nothing really big going on out there in the Atlantic, which is good. Very strong Azores high, Bermuda high that is in place here, keeping things really stable, keeping those trade winds going nice and strong. Lots of dry air coming off of Africa. We got still deep layer vertical wind shear over this region, and that means things are very unfavorable. But we got to watch these tropical waves because, yeah, sometimes when they get into the wrong spot, they can develop eventually, not necessarily over here or over here or over here, but sometimes they could actually be undetected and fly under the radar until they get over here in the Eastern Pacific where they can develop. And that's climatology for you. Usually the Eastern Pacific gets in the action first, usually before the Atlantic wakes up, usually towards August. Now, all the way out, we're going to go all the way out into June 5th, June 6th. While the GFS is not showing anything right now with any Central American gyre, the background state by the 6th, by the 7th, and by the 8th of June should slowly become favorable for something to develop down here. A large monsoonal gyre where we get southerly winds like this. So they kind of turn like this and then they pivot around and you get this large gyre that develops. And usually off that gyre, we can get these areas of spin that could then become seedlings for tropical cyclone development, if that makes sense. Right now, the GFS is not showing anything, and if we look at the previous several model runs, hasn't indicated anything yet, but that doesn't mean that it won't develop or nothing will develop by early June, because what I'm about to show you will clearly defy all GFS model runs in the previous. Before we do get to that, though, I wanted to look at the Eastern Pacific briefly, because I'm going to try to include that in my routine tropical weather outlooks, because yes, we do have friends that live here in Mexico, as well as Cabo San Lucas. Great destination for a lot of holiday people to go to. A lot of resorts down there. I've been there a couple of times and it's beautiful. It really is, until you get one of these tropical systems that rolls right through, then your vacation can be potentially ruined. So again, same level of the atmosphere, 850 millibars, and this is what we look for right here. There's an area of good spin, lots of tight vorticity there being bundled up on the GFS, 60 hours out. That's going to be the area that the National Hurricane Center is watching, but that's going to be short-lived because we have another area that the NHC is watching down here too. This is spinning up a lot more faster, and guess what? If we put this into motion here, this gets really, really tight. That's very dark red to black colors on your screen. That's a very, very tight amount of vorticity at 850 millibars. And this, my guys, is what we look for when it comes to tropical cyclone formation. That is why this is my favorite product that I like to use off of Dr. Levi Cowan's website, tropicaltidbits.com. Because of what this website provides us a 3-plot system and the color shading of vorticity. Again, darker reds, stronger spin in the atmosphere, and usually that indicates a hurricane. Now, of course, this is about 9 to 10 days out from occurring, so please use the GFS with great caution. If we look at the European model, it is not showing much at all over the next 144 hours, and if we look at the 12Z run, it is a little aggressive. So there is some consistency here, both from the European and GFS, indicating that there will be some sort of a tropical storm developing out here. Rather, that gets very close to land here in Mexico. That is still to be announced as we get closer, or if this gets very close, utterly close to the Cabo San Lucas metro area. Well, not metro, well, sort of vacation spot, I should say, in Puerto Vallarta here in Mexico. The Canadian model is also pretty similar, only that it wants to develop 2 systems instead of 1, and that brings it really close again to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, Puerto Vallarta in about 10 days. So there is a signal out here in the Eastern Pacific that something does develop in about 3 to 7 days. Okay, folks, let's take a look now at our velocity potential anomaly here. This is the European Ensemble forecast, a blend of all 51 different members to give us an average look at what the atmosphere is going to be doing over the next couple of weeks. And these green shadings, this is a Hofmolar diagram showing us that the dates are on the left side, okay, and longitude lines are up and down, up and down, up and down. So you can see these dotted lines, that's your longitude, and then the time scale is right here, these lines going across. Hopefully you guys can see that just fine. And the green shading here is upward motion in the atmosphere. Favorable environment for tropical cyclone development. Not always. You need other factors that get involved with, such as lighter wind shear and enough deep layer moisture that gets in the way of things that allows tropical cyclone formation. So when we look at this, the conditions in the Atlantic are very unfavorable right now, quite hostile to say the least. Lots of Saharan dust coming off of Africa, stronger trade winds, stronger than normal Azores high right now, allowing that sinking air to really plummet down to lower levels of the atmosphere. And so the ending result here is that the conditions in the Atlantic right now are quite hostile, and I do not see any development at least through the end of May. Possibly once we get into early June, there is still some early signals here that we will get lesser unfavorable conditions in the Atlantic and perhaps more neutral to favorable conditions once we go into the first full week of June. And climatology, that's why the Atlantic hurricane season doesn't begin until June 1st and not May 15th. Not to confuse you with the outlooks that had begun last week on Thursday. Okay, and then of course you have all this upward motion. Now that's not all. Let's look at the extended forecast. This goes all the way out into early July, and we got to use this with great caution because every model run is going to behave differently, and it's going to give us a different outcome. But right now, there are early indications, there are early signals. Remember, folks, the GFS model is more 2-week forecast when we look at that, but this is looking even beyond the 2-week scope of things. This is looking all the way out into the entire month of June for us and into early July. And what it's giving us here is at the MJO right here, you can see this green motion or green upward motion anomaly is giving us that, yeah, the atmosphere looks to be quite conducive here for tropical cyclone development potentially by the middle of June at least. Okay, you got to look down here at the thumbnail. This is the Atlantic side. This is the East Pacific side. So you can see here roughly about the 11th of June and beyond, I think things are going to wake up in the Atlantic in a big way, where we get a lot of this upward motion, lesser deep layer vertical wind shear, more moisture in the deep layers, and that means more tropical waves coming off of Africa. Eventually, they develop within that Central American gyre. Once it does develop, if it develops by the middle of June. And that's a look at that extended forecast when it comes to the MJO or Madden-Julian Oscillation Index forecast. Now let's get into climatology really quickly. I made this graphic, not the graphic itself, but I added some things such as we are here now, the number of named storms and hurricanes during the peak, and so on and so forth. And this will update every single day because I use PowerPoint to edit this, which is really awesome. Hopefully the NHC likes this a lot. Maybe they'll introduce it in their climatology one of these days, hopefully. See if I inspire them. But right now, we are here now, May 21st. And as of May 21st, we average only 4 named storms, folks. 4 named storms. That's either tropical storms or hurricanes, and 1 hurricane on average. So this is a very slow time. We are not supposed to have a Cat 4 or a Cat 5 hurricane this time of the year. In fact, there's going to be another little break here with no hurricanes, which means from about, I would say, the 28th of May all the way until the 1st of June, there has not been 1 hurricane that has developed from 1944 to 2020. And if my memory serves correctly, that is 76 years, okay, of historical data. And so that means only named storms. But it's not until we get into late August into September when things tend to get more active. You can see this. I made this. All right, during the peak of hurricane season, we typically average 115 named storms per 76 years, or per 100 years, if that makes sense. And then 56 or 57 hurricanes, okay? So to divide this all up and do mathematical equations, that adds up to roughly about 1.52 named storms per year, which means on this very day, which is September 10th, that's the peak, you're more than likely to have a named storm almost every September 10th. The chances are much higher to see a named storm somewhere at some time in the Atlantic Basin. Versus hurricanes, that could happen out of 5 years. If I do the math correctly here, out of 5 years, 3 to 4 of those years feature at least a hurricane, Category 1 hurricane or greater. Okay, so that's kind of what the math here simplifies. And again, I did make that using my very advanced mathematical equations of division. Division. So that's what we have here as far as climatology. And to summarize this even more, this is what it actually looks like on a map perspective. So we can see running from May 21st through the 31st, 21 named storms have formed since 1851, running through 2023, which that seems like a lot, but that really isn't a lot. How often do we get late May development? Not very often. And it didn't happen last year, but it happened the year before and the year before that. Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's usually a signal that we get very busy seasons. And in the Eastern Pacific, we also have had a lot of tropical development there since 1949, running through 2023. All right, now with that being said, let's take a look at our sea surface temperatures. All right, I'm going to go through this rather quickly so this video doesn't end up being super duper quadruply long. So you can see right now, sea surface temperatures have really warmed up very, very quickly in across most of the Gulf of Mexico. Already along the coast of Florida, sea surface temperatures are already in the low to mid 80s. So really, really warming up there quickly. And it only took a few days, by the way, for those waters to warm up that quick. Also, really warm sea surface temperatures in the deep tropics here of the Caribbean. We talked about that a couple of days ago, how warm those waters are. And then, of course, over here, where we have that area to watch, wow, water temperatures there are very, very warm right now. Around 30 to almost 31 degrees Celsius. That's in the mid to upper 80s. That's quite warm. Okay, and so that's why we are going to really need to watch the Eastern Pacific, at least in the next week, for tropical development. And then, of course, out here, still having to struggle to warm things up, and that's because the Azores high, Bermuda high, that remains quite strong. But not to the northeastern part of the Atlantic, is it the same way? This is what we have right now as of May 20th. This is delayed by 1 day. And the blue anomalies here correspond to near average to slightly below average sea surface temperatures versus all of this red here. This is absolutely sickening, okay? And I'm not saying this to cause fear mongering at all. This is really, really, really warm, okay? Some of these anomalies here off of the UK, the United Kingdom, are running as warm as 3 to 4 degrees Celsius above average. That is quite concerning. That is very, very warm. Even so, it's cooler than the deep tropics. It's a matter of, does this patch of warm water come this way all the way down, and we get a horseshoe shape that develops here over the main development region, over the Iberian Peninsula? Should that occur, then we have a very busy season ahead of us. Usually that's what it generally means. We have very warm sea surface temperatures across the entire southwestern, western Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean. In fact, parts of the Gulf of Mexico here off of Florida running 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above average. That is pretty concerning, given just a few days ago, those waters were not all that warm above average. So we have really warmed things up here quickly in the last few days over the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. You could see this in the 15-day sea surface temperature anomaly change. Blue colors indicate sea surface temperatures have continued to cool over the last 2 weeks, versus oranger and redder colors like over Florida, over the southwestern Atlantic, like the Bahamas. Sea surface temperatures here have continued to warm at a pretty quick rate over the last couple of weeks, including the northeastern Atlantic, where it has warmed up pretty alarmingly fast, especially over the UK area, where we have had a huge jump in sea surface temperatures over the last couple of weeks. Now, another product that I like to keep an eye on is not just what goes on at the surface of the ocean, but what goes on below the surface. This is the upper ocean heat content map that we have right now from the University of Miami, Florida. Really, really good map, very detailed, and it updates quite often. And so what we have here is really high upper ocean heat content that is ongoing across the northwestern and central Caribbean. Things have really backed off a lot here in the last couple of weeks due to strong trade winds over the 50 degrees west longitude line. So that is good news. The upper ocean heat content here is not as high as it was before, but that's not to say that it could recover very quickly, because again, I cannot emphasize this enough. It's only May 21st. We have all of June, all of July, all of August, and a good fair amount of September. Usually it's in mid-September when sea surface temperatures usually peak at their warmest here in the Atlantic. So we have a long way to go before the warming stops at all in much of the Atlantic basin, especially in the deep tropics. And you can see this on the anomaly charts, still a lot of oranges and yellows across the Caribbean, as well as portions there just to the east of the Leeward and Windward Islands like Barbados, seeing some really high upper ocean heat content far above average, and also the loop current here in the Gulf of Mexico running ahead of where it should be this time of the year. And that's important because if we get a storm that tracks like this, it kind of takes a track that you see here, and then it kind of curves around. That it could, if we get a system that moves over that patch of water, hurricanes could go haywire quickly. The last thing that I wanted to add in this routine tropical weather outlook and discussion is the amount of generalized wind shear that we have right now in the Gulf of Mexico, running about normal this time of the year now. After we had some pretty good wind shear back in early May, things have dwindled quite a bit since then. If we take a look here at the Caribbean right now, deep layer vertical wind shear now is below average, with the latest value here coming up a little bit, but still well below average for this time of the year. And that's going to be important, because if this stays far below average, that means what? That means we got to keep an eye on the Atlantic, especially once we go into June and July. and then it usually shifts off towards the main development region off of Africa during the peak of hurricane season. But anyways, if you found this routine tropical weather outlook and discussion very helpful, detailed, and informative, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell notification icon, hit the like button, and share this video with your family and friends on social media. As always, have a great rest of your Wednesday on this 21st of May, 2025. I'll be back with you guys more tomorrow with another routine tropical weather update.